Students, a very good morning and welcome to the class. In our last class, yesterday, we discussed first 7 chapters of the novel Oliver Twist. Today we are going to discuss some more chapters and we will begin with chapter 8. Yesterday we came to know about the birth of the Oliver Twist and the unfortunate death of his sick mother just after his birth, and how he is raised in an orphanage, and how he is given very nominal food at that orphanage and he demands for the more, and how he is beaten, how atrocities are committed on the boys living in that orphanage. We discussed all this yesterday. And yesterday we read that Oliver decides to run away from that orphanage. He escapes from that orphanage. So students, now the Oliver Twist is on the road and he decides to go for London, and a signpost is there that shows that London is 70 miles away from that place. So on that day he manages to walk 20 miles with only a crust of bread and some water. The boys keep walking. He keeps walking and he gets weaker along the way and has to beg for food and water. After a week of walking, Oliver arrives in the town of Barnet, and he is now too weak to stand. A boy is standing there. He watches Oliver. He approaches to Oliver. He is of Oliver's age. This boy buys something to eat for Oliver and asks him whether he is going to London. Oliver says that yes, he is going to London. This boy tells Oliver that he can introduce him to an old gentleman who will give him a place to stay, and nothing will be charged from Oliver in return of all this kindness. Students, the name of this boy is Jack Dawkins, and he is also known as Artful Dodger among his circle. Oliver begins to think that Dodger might not be the most desirable companion, but he still plans to follow him to the gentleman's place in London. So at this place, Oliver meets Fagin, who appears to be an old gentleman, but students, he is the villain of this novel. And Oliver sees that there are many other boys of his age. Now the night is approaching and Oliver falls asleep. Now when Fagin thinks that boys are sleeping, actually Oliver is still wake up. Oliver sees Fagin pull a small box of a trapdoor in the floor and Fagin admires the watches, jewelries and trinkets that are there in that box. And Fagin realizes that Oliver is watching him and questions him threateningly, but seems reassured and lets Oliver wash up. Next day, Oliver takes breakfast with Dodger, Charlie, Bates, and Fagin. Dodger and Charlie says that they have been working and produce some pocket books and pocket handkerchiefs. Oliver is very much impressed by their workmanship and hopes Fagin will teach him to make these things. Students, Fagin and Bates, along with Dodger, play a game where Fagin pretends to be an old man walking along, and Bates and Dodger pickpocket him. Two young women, Bate and Nancy, that stay with in that house with Fagin and his company, stop by, and Oliver likes them both very much. Everyone goes out except Oliver and Fagin. And Fagin tells Oliver if he works like Dodger and works as he is asked, he will end up like a gentleman. Students, now Oliver spends most of his days playing the pickpocket game with Fagin and other boys. Now he wants some fresh air and asks Fagin that can he go out with Dodger and Bates. Fagin permits him and Oliver goes out with two boys. But students, Oliver feels worried because they don't seem to be going anywhere at all. They are just, the company is just standing there, they are not moving. When Bates and Dodger spot an old gentleman at a bookstall and approach him from behind, Oliver sees that Dodger pull a handkerchief from old man's pocket, and then the both of them run away from that scene. Oliver suddenly understands what has been going on at Fagin's all along and becomes delirious, running away down the street. Students, at this moment, the old man, whose name is Mr. Brownlow, realizes that his handkerchief is gone, and when he notices Oliver running away, assumes that Oliver is the thief. Bates and Dodger join in cry, happy to have the attention drawn from themselves, and soon everyone is shouting, "Stop, the thief is running, stop, thief." Student, someone eventually knocks Oliver down, and a police officer comes and drags him off, with victimized gentlemen following. Although Mr. Brownlow said he would rather not press charges, Oliver is taken to the police station. Mr. Brownlow doubts that Oliver is guilty and sees something in his face that reminds him of someone, although he cannot think who. The magistrate, Mr. Fang, is offended by Mr. Brownlow's impertinence is not being cowed down by him, and so he won't listen to what he says in defense of Oliver. Oliver is quite ill and can't respond to the questions, but the magistrate believes that he is just trying to trick them, and Oliver ends up in fainting. Students, Mr. Fang sentences him to 3 months hard labor. Just then, at this very moment, the bookseller enters the court and demands that he should be heard. So he says that to Mr. Fang that he saw the whole incident and Oliver is not guilty. Mr. Fang dismisses the charges and Mr. Brownlow takes the sick Oliver and the bookstall keeper away in a coach. Now, students, a turning point comes into Oliver's life. Mr. Brownlow takes Oliver home with him, where a bed is prepared for him and he is taken care of with great solitude. He hasn't experienced all these things in his whole life. Due to weakness, he can't move around, and slowly he regains his strength. When he is able to move, Mrs. Bedwin takes him down to her room where Oliver sees a portrait of a lady that entrances him. Mr. Brownlow comes to see him and notices that Oliver looks exactly like the portrait that is there on the wall. Oliver, surprised by Mr. Brownlow's exclamation, faints. Students, on the other hand, what is happening at Fagin's house? Fagin questions Dodger and Bates about what happened to Oliver, and he is given the whole information about how Oliver ran away and how he was arrested and taken to a police station. Fagin says that he is worried about the boy because he thinks that Oliver will say something that will get them in trouble. Skies says that they must go and find out what happened to Oliver, but none of them wants to go near the police station. Bet and Nancy return, and so Fagin asks Bet to go. Finally, Sykes ultimately convinces Nancy to go and know about Oliver. Nancy goes to the police station and asks for his brother Oliver, and the officer there tells her that he was taken off by a gentleman to somewhere in Pentonville. Nancy gives this information to Fagin and Skies, and Fagin sends her and Dodger off to find him. So, students, at Mr. Brownlow's house, what is happening? When Oliver has fainted after watching the particular portrait that is there over the wall in Mr. Brownlow's house, Mr. Brownlow takes down the picture for fear that it overexcites him. Oliver misses it the next day, but Mrs. Bedwin just says that they will put it back when he has recovered. Mrs. Bedwin tells Oliver about her family and teaches him cribbage until it is time for him to go to bed. One evening, after Oliver has regained much of his strength, Mr. Brownlow asks for him to come to see him in his study. Students, Oliver is worried that he is going to be turned back out into streets once again. But instead, Mr. Brownlow says that he won't even desert Oliver so long as Oliver doesn't give him a reason to, and he asks Oliver to tell him the story of his upbringing. Before Oliver can begin, someone comes to meet Mr. Brownlow, and he goes to his study. After tea that day, Mr. Brownlow sends Oliver to the bookstall with some books to be returned and some money that he owes. Mr. Grimwig, the visitor, believes that Oliver will make off with the money and the books, but Mr. Brownlow has a faith that Oliver will return quickly, and so they wait together to see who is right. So, students, this was the summary of the chapters from 8 to 15. Now, let us analyze these chapters very briefly. Students, here we see that Oliver reaches city of London, where he meets the best and worst characters of his life. In meeting the artful Dodger and Fagin, Oliver ironically has his first experience of kindness and generosity that eventually turns out to be a very bad occurrence in his life. It is the first time that we have seen anyone to be kind to be Oliver at any level. So it is not immediately clear how evil character Fagin is. This doesn't become truly clear until the end of the novel, when even his minor kindness are exposed to be completely selfishly motivated. Oliver's moral goodness and clarity, despite this fact that he was raised without any example of good morals is underscored by this. And for even though this is the first time he has been taken care of at any level, the minute that he understands that Fagin and his boys are thieves, he is completely disillusioned and wants nothing to do with them. This behavior of Oliver is juxtaposed with true generosity and kindness in the form of Mr. Brownlow and Mr. Bedwin. Mr. Brownlow, completely unlike any of the adults who have so far cared for Oliver, takes a moment to look more deeply at him, ignoring the fact that Oliver stole from him. Thus, for the first time, an adult truly cares about Oliver's personality as it really is, not as he perceives it to be or would like it to be, and Oliver becomes more than just another orphan or potential thief. Mr. Brownlow's attention to Oliver is especially striking when juxtaposed with the blindness of the mob who haunts him down. This section, students also introduces the motive of the importance of family ties that will occur throughout the book. At this point, no one in the novel has any idea of Oliver's family ties, but he is shown to have a very strong emotional reaction to a portrait in Mr. Brownlow's house. And similarly, Mr. Brownlow has an instinctual like of interest for Oliver's face. Later, the same thing happens with Rose, who is also a character in the novel who turns out to be a relative of Oliver. So, students, this much for today. We will continue with this novel in our next class. Thank you very much.